But remember, last year, Rod, the Buckeyes were this close to beating Georgia because they did make the playoff, even though they lost to Michigan. They got into the Final Four and dang near took down the Bulldogs.
Did they play Georgia better than anybody else played Georgia?
All year long.
I mean, it seemed like that. I mean, like I said, I could go back and look at the regular season, but they seem like they played Georgia tougher maybe than anybody else played in this that past year.
If not for an injury to Marvin Harrison, if not for the kicking situation at the end, clock management, they might have pulled off that upset, and they would have played TCU for the national championship. And think about how close we got to a Michigan versus Ohio State national championship game. That
would have been wild. I mean, that would have been crazy.
That would have been like Texas and Oklahoma playing for a national
dude. Have you ever seen rivals like that meet up in a national title game?
I don't think so.
There's no way, right?
Close by Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah, that's it.
Or LSU and
Alabama.
Yeah. It would be like
That's
Alabama playing Auburn for the national
championship.
You're
right. Yeah.
Let's talk to someone who would know if that's ever happened before. He is an absolute college football historian, especially with the Buckeyes. He's been covering the Buckeyes since the late 80s. He works for 24/7 Sports, bucknuts.com. He is our friend Steve Helwagen. Steve, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, guys. What's going on?
Thanks for joining us.
Football is going on, and my co-host here was asking about your name, Helwagen. Are we saying that right? Is it Helwagen?
Helwagen, yeah. German Helwagen, yeah.
Helwagen, right?
Helwagen, that's it.
Oh,
yep.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a good name.
That's great. I'm sure the broadcasters loved you then when you played sports back in the day.
Yeah, it starts a lot of good conversations, to put it that way. But yeah, you have to explain it, so that's good, I suppose.
I like it, man.
Nice.
It's a good one. Hey, Steve, and you're a good one covering the Buckeyes. You've been doing it a long, long time. And let's start at the top with Ryan Day. You heard me maybe be talking about him. What's the mood with Ryan Day? You don't beat Michigan and Columbus, it's not good, and they haven't. And Jim Harbaugh is trying to turn the tables here. What's the overall mood surrounding Ryan Day and the program?
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State dominated that rivalry for about 20 years. They've won like 17 out of 19 games over a 20-year period there. They didn't play, obviously, in the COVID year there in 2020. But since the series resumed, it's been Michigan, double digits both times. So I think on one hand, you have the dyed-in-the-wool Ohio State people who live and die the Michigan game, and then you have the rest of us who are living in the year 2023 who realize that, it's not just one game. I would never reduce it to say it's the same as the Indiana game, which is this Saturday, or the Illinois game or anybody else. It is a season unto itself, but as we saw last year, you can lose that game and still get in the playoff and still almost win the national championship. So, you don't worry too much about it in this modern era of college football because, what you do over the basis of the 12-game season is what's going to determine what your postseason looks like. So, to me, I just look at it that, and especially when we go into this 12-team playoff, there's going to be a year, you brought it up, when Alabama loses to Auburn but still goes on and wins a national championship. I mean, that's liable to happen. So I think the sooner we all come to grips with what what the future is in college football, better it's going to be.
No question. Steve Helwagen is with us, and Ryan Day recruiting like crazy too. I thought where Ryan Day and the Buckeyes have 9 top 100 players already committed for the recruiting class, so he's bringing in the talent. And here he is again with this offense. Let's start with the quarterback. We know about the receivers, and I want your thoughts on them, where they rank with the all-time Buckeye great receivers. But let's talk about the quarterback. Where do we stand with the QB position headed into game week?
Yeah, we're going to go over and talk to Coach Day here at noon Eastern time today, coming up in about an hour or so. And, it's up in the air whether or not he's going to announce a starter or not. I would have thought it would have been the junior Kyle McCord all along, but it just tells me that the redshirt freshman Devin Brown has really pushed him during preseason camp for them to have not named McCord as the starter. So nothing would surprise me, whether it's McCord, whether it's Brown, whether he's going to keep it under wraps, whether he's going to play them both in the first game against Indiana. Of course, after that, they play Youngstown State and Western Kentucky before they go on the road. For them, it would be week 4 at Notre Dame. We saw Notre Dame, obviously, in action this past weekend. They looked pretty good with Sam Hartman at quarterback. So that game's looming large as a matchup of top 10 teams here in a few weeks. But as of right now, we don't know. We're going to get in there today, and if he feels like telling the world, then I suppose we'll find out. But it surprises me if it's not McCord. It's just he's got an extra year in the system, and he also played high school ball with Marvin Harrison Jr. back in Philadelphia. And it just seems to make sense that he'd be the starter, at least for the first game, and then take it from there.
Hey, Steve, whoever wins that job, they're going to have the luxury of throwing to the best receiver in the country, and Marvin Harrison Jr. I've heard Brian Hartline say, out of all the great receivers that have come out of there recently, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith and Jigma, that Marvin Harrison Jr. might be the most talented of that group. In your opinion, what makes him, even a part of that group, separate and stand out from it?
Yeah, he's just an outstanding route runner. And he's the hardest worker, one of the hardest workers on the team. Afterwards, you'll see him get on to the machine and catch passes, long passes, short passes. He just constantly works on his craft. So he had the God-given ability. Obviously his dad played the NFL, Marvin Harrison, for years. And so, he was in football from a young age and understood the game and has kind of been positioned for this moment. And he's taken full advantage of it because of how hard he works, and that's what sets him apart. He burst on the scene with 3 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. He really didn't play a whole lot that freshman year, and then last year had over 70 catches, I think 15 touchdowns last year. I think a lot of people are looking at him as a sleeper candidate perhaps for the Heisman Trophy, maybe the 6th or 7th, 8th favorite. I don't know at this point, but it's kind of hard, I think, although we saw Devontae Smith from Alabama won it during the COVID year in 2020. Perhaps it's something a wide receiver could do again, but it is a little bit more difficult. It's typically a quarterback or a running back award.
Yeah, he was over 1,200 yards last year, 14 touchdowns, and just the route running, the size, the catch radius he's got too. And then Egbukas is a good player too. On the other side, he over 1,000 yards too at 10 touchdowns. The quarterback, whoever wins that job, is going to have plenty of options. Now, on defense, Jim Knowles, well, we here in Austin and with Texas know him from his Oklahoma State days. He was brought in now year 2, where they're looking to improve that side of the ball. It was better last year, but the Michigan game was not good. All the big plays, they got gashed in that game. What's the mood on the defensive coordinator and where they're headed on that side of the ball?
Yeah, I think they're going to make some improvement this year. I think what we were lulled into last year was Ohio State played some of the worst offenses around with Notre Dame at the beginning of the season. Indiana, Rutgers, Iowa, Northwestern. I mean, it was pathetic. Some of these offenses that were put on the field last year and made Ohio State's defense, I think people thought better than they really were. Then Maryland exposed them with Taulia Tagovailoa there in week 11, and then week 12, Michigan, put up a big number against them, and so did Georgia. So a lot of big plays, too many big plays last year, trying to get that curtailed. They're hoping to be improved up front. They've got a couple really good guys, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Mike Hall, defensive tackle, those guys up front. And hopefully in the secondary, they're much improved. They brought in Ole Miss transferred Davison Igbinosun and Jihad Carter, a safety from Syracuse, in the transfer portal. Taiwan Malone, a defensive tackle from Ole Miss. So they did energize this thing with some talent from the outside, and just hoping in year 2 that everybody's a year older, smarter, stronger, better, and it'll look better in the bottom line. But to me, the season comes down to the second half at Michigan. Can you stop the run with Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards? Can you establish the run with Travion Henderson, Mayan Williams? And to me, that's what's going to determine the fate of this season to me.
Real quick, Steve, because we are very familiar with Jim Knowles down here from his time at Oklahoma State. Have there been great reviews, rave reviews? Are people still, the jury's still out on Jim Knowles up there? What are the thoughts about him as a coordinator right now?
Well, you lose those last 2 games the way that you did, giving up 40-some points to Michigan and Georgia. That's not good, obviously. And too many big plays, too much gambling, too many guys put on an island that can't make those plays. As I said, I think they believed they had better talent than they actually had because of how bad some of the teams were that they played in the first 2/3 of the season. So I think everybody's going into it with their eyes wide open. The talent level's a little better this year. Kids understand the scheme a little bit better, and hopefully he won't gamble quite as much. So add it all up, and maybe the bottom line will look better here in 2023.
Yeah, it's a heck of a schedule, too, Steve. Steve Helwagen with us from bucknuts.com, also the 24/7 site there in Columbus. Notre Dame at Notre Dame Stadium. They're going to play at Purdue. They're going to play at Wisconsin. Camp Randall's never easy with Luke Fickell coaching the Badgers now. And, of course, wrap it up in Michigan Stadium there in Ann Arbor. There's some nice home games too, but man, that's a tough road to hoe in the Big Ten because Purdue's expected to be pretty darn good, and Buckeye fans know how tough it is to play at Camp Randall.
Yeah, no doubt. Fickle was a winner at Cincinnati. The only non-Power 5 team to make a playoff was Luke Fickle in Cincinnati, so he's a proven winner and would love nothing more than to beat his alma mater. He actually played against Ohio State at Cincinnati a few years ago, Ryan Day's first or second year, and the Buckeyes won 42-0. So I think that sticks in his craw a little bit, and he'd like to show his alma mater a thing or two. And it's going to be a crazy environment up there in October. But as you said, I mean, it's set up there for them. I mean, if they go through this schedule and win the Big Ten championship and, get to 13-0, you could make a case for number one, depending on what Georgia does. So to me, it's going to be a great battle. It's all going to come out in the wash. Either you get it done this year or you don't. And, Ohio State fans are burning to get back there to that championship game.
We'll see. Hey, you mentioned Luke Fickle of Buckeye. Marcus Freeman, who the Buckeyes will face, was a former Buckeye player at Notre Dame. What about Brian Hartline? Rod mentioned him, then you mentioned him too, the wide receivers coach, now offensive coordinator, who's done, it doesn't matter. Every year they have NFL elite receivers. He's recruited and developed as good as anybody in the country. When do you think Brian Hartline gets his chance to be a head coach somewhere?
Yeah, that's a great question. He finally, I say finally, it's been a kind of a meteoric rise. He was just a support staff person after he retired from the NFL. Urban Meyer brought him on, just to kind of be around the edges and help out a little bit. And then the whole thing with Urban Meyer and Zach Smith went down early. I think it was the 2018 season. And he got pressed in as the wide receivers coach that year and liked it and stuck around and has recruited the best receivers in the country year in and year out. Now the offensive coordinator with Kevin Wilson leaving to go to Tulsa to be the head coach down there. And he's got the opportunity. I think if this goes well for him in a 1 or 2 year stint, here's the offensive coordinator. You could see him move on somewhere as a head coach someplace. But, I think he probably would like to be the head coach at Ohio State when Ryan Day leaves. But that apprenticeship might last a few more years. You never know. So I think they like it the way they got it set up right now. He's a family guy. Got family here in Columbus, and happy as things stand right now.
He does a great job, and has already got a couple 5-star commitments for the receiver position coming to replace these two. It's a pipeline. Hey, Steve, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Enjoy. But we'll be watching today for your coverage with the Ryan Day news conference. Does he announce a starter or not? It'll be a big headline, obviously, in Columbus and throughout the college football landscape. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yep, guys, take care.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson both last year.
That's what Sark's trying to build. Sark wants to have that reputation in Texas.
Yeah, and the kid Marvin Harrison's so darn good. And you played corner. That guy,
he's a freak.
Well, and I've told you this before. You mentioned Brian Hartline, and Brian Hartline told our friend Howard Griffith from the Big Ten Network, because Brian Hartline was a wide receiver himself, and he said what makes Harrison so tough is he's got short legs.
Yep.
He's 6'3" or 6'4" because he's got a long torso like his dad did. So he's got short legs, so he's so quick in and out of routes. He's a great route runner, but he's 6'3". Yeah. And he's got long arms, and it's a problem, Rod. You've talked about this before with Marvin Harrison. If you had a quick guy, you knew you had to be quick. If you had a tall guy, you knew you maybe could outquick him, but you just got to beat him at the high point. This dude brings both to the table, which is really hard to handle.
Yeah, because you just talked about it. He's got the big frame he has great body control, and he can go win those 50-50 balls if need be and match your physicality. But because you just talked about how the physiology, right, with his really short legs, the whole point is that when a receiver is built like 6'4" frame, he can get in and out of his breaks quickly. He can't decelerate and accelerate because he's got them big, long trunks. He's got to slow them big things down. Well, now you're telling me this dude is 6'4", but he's got the legs of a 6'5'11" guy?
Yep.
So he actually can decelerate and accelerate, get in and out of the breaks like a guy that's under 6 foot, but he's got the frame and upper body of a 6'3", 6'4" guy? Yeah, that's a bit of a nightmare. That's like some evil creature out of Greek mythology. He's got the legs of a 5'11" guy, but the torso of a 6'4" guy. It's like, what?
Yeah.
I mean,
And he's in he's got his father's a Hall of Famer in the NFL,
yeah,
and
so
he's a hard worker.
So the cerebral part is there too, by the way. He's got tons of football IQ, grew up with it.
Yeah, 6'4", 205, Marvin Harrison Jr. Some compare him to say he's the best receiver to come through the college ranks since Calvin Johnson, Megatron.
Yeah. It's like a centaur, man. Body of a little DB,
centaur.
and then the upper body of a huge big body wide receiver. That is not fair. It's not fair.